everyone, thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about the movie A Christmas Story. It was directed by Bob Clark and released in 1983, and it is based on the book In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, which is by Jean Shepherd and was published in 1966. And I'm just going to get right into the details of the story because everybody knows the plot of this movie, right? Basically everybody. They have been doing 24-hour marathons of this movie for almost 2 decades now. So yeah, I think there's no need for me to have a spoiler-free section in this video. And also the title of this book, fun fact, in Christine, which I just did a book versus movie for. Actually, no. I just filmed that one, but this video is going to come out before Christine. So next week's book versus movie is for Christine by Stephen King. But in the movie Christine, Will Darnell has a sign that says, "In God we trust, all others pay cash," which is a very Will Darnell thing to have. And I thought it was funny considering I'm covering A Christmas Story right now. So yeah, I just thought I would share that. But anyway, this book is a semi-autobiographical collection of short stories about Jean Shepherd's childhood. And the way the book is structured, we have Shepherd, who is now an adult living in New York City, and he comes to visit his hometown to write a story about it. And so he stops in at a local bar, which his childhood buddy now owns, and he chats it up with him, thinking back on the old days. And so they will bring up something from their past when they were kids. And then the following chapter is the full story of whatever it was they just alluded to. And then we return to them at the bar, where then they allude to some other memory. And then we get a flashback again, getting the whole story. And then we return to the bar, and so on and so forth. By the way, his friend Flick is the one who owns the bar. And at the very end, they mention Schwartz, and we find out that Schwartz died in World War II. So that was pretty sad. But anyway, the major stories from the book that are included in the movie, because there's stories in the book that we don't see in the movie, but the ones that do overlap, we have the main story in the movie of him wanting a Red Ryder BB gun, which was in the book, and everything that this entails, where he has to write a theme for class, and then he keeps being told, "You'll shoot your eye out," and then he goes to see Santa to ask him for the BB gun, and then his father is the one who ultimately gets it for him, and then we have him hurting his eye the first time he uses the gun, but he lies and tells his mom it was from an icicle. And then the story of the father winning a major award, which ends up being a lamp shaped like a woman's leg, and his mom hates this lamp, and so she breaks it, as well as him saying the F word for the first time, or him getting caught saying the F word, as well as him getting his little Orphan Annie decoder pin, and this ends up being kind of a disenchanting experience for him. The story of him beating up the neighborhood bully, as well as him getting an embarrassing gift from his aunt. And yeah, like I said, there are a number of stories in this book that don't appear in the movie at all, although they do include maybe certain elements of some of these other stories. For example, there is a story all about the candy they liked as kids, and there's like an emphasis on the jawbreakers. But also within this story, he mentions that one time in class, all the kids showed up with wax teeth in their mouth, and then the teacher had them turn in these teeth, and this is something we do see in the movie. And then the story with their hillbilly neighbors and the dogs who the dad doesn't like, as well as them eating Christmas dinner at a Chinese restaurant because these hillbilly neighbor dogs end up ruining their turkey dinner. That was not in this particular book, but I did read that that was a story Jean Shepherd wrote, but it was published in a book he wrote in the 70s. So I personally didn't read that story because I just read this book from 66. But yeah, this was a story that Shepherd had written. He just wrote it later on. But one of the stories that underwent the biggest change was the story of Ralphie getting caught saying the F word. So in the movie, this happens when he is helping his dad change a flat tire, and he's holding like the hubcap that has the bolts or whatever. And the hubcap gets knocked out of his hands, and Ralphie says, "Oh, fudge," which leads his father to be upset with him. And then the mom puts soap in his mouth as punishment and asks him where he heard that word. And the truth is, he hears his dad say it all the time, but instead of saying that, he blames it on his friend. And so the mom calls up the mom's friend, and that mom punishes the friend for something the friend didn't even do. Whereas in the book, so Ralphie's uncle comes to visit, and the uncle tells a dirty joke which has the F word in it, and Ralphie overhears this, and then he tells a friend this joke, and then the friend tells the joke while in his home, and the mom overhears. And so then the mom asks the friend, like, where did you hear that? And the friend says Ralphie. And so the mom calls up Ralphie's mom, and then Ralphie's mom asks him, like, did you say this? And he says that, yeah, he did. And this is when he learns it's bad to say this word. However, the mom and dad don't get upset with him about this. And instead, when the mom tells the dad later on at dinner, they both find it funny. So they're just amused. However, the mom does tell the dad, like, next time Uncle so-and-so comes over, like, you need to tell him to keep it PG around the kids, essentially. And then the Ovaltine / Little Orphan Annie storyline is very similar in both. We get a bit more backstory on it in the book, like how in the book, his family did not drink Ovaltine. And in order to get a decoder pin, you needed to turn in this like piece from the Ovaltine tin. But he's like, my family doesn't drink Ovaltine. Like, what am I supposed to do? But he ends up finding a can like from someone's trash. And so that's how he's able to get the decoder pin. But in both, this ends up being a lesson in commercialism because he thinks that now he is like part of this secret group and he's so excited to get the coded message at the end of the radio program. But when he decodes it, the message ends up being, be sure to drink your Ovaltine. And Ovaltine is a chocolate milk mix that sponsored the radio program Little Orphan Annie. And so he realizes like this coded message is just a commercial. And so he experiences that disenchanted, jaded feeling we all have at some point in life when we realize that money and commercialism is behind nearly everything. Right now would be a great way for me to segue into a sponsorship, but this video isn't sponsored by anyone, so I won't. But to continue the talk on commercialism, in the book we learned that the competition the dad is participating in was sponsored by a soda called Knee High, and their logo was a woman's leg. So he gets high enough in the competition that he ends up winning this major award, which is a lamp of a woman's leg. But in the movie, it just seems like this lamp is just so random. But in the book, it makes sense because this was the logo of the soda company that was sponsoring this competition, right? And so by the dad showing off this leg lamp in the front window, he's just giving Knee High soda free advertisement. And in the book, they have the lamp for months before the mom accidentally breaks it, but really she does it on purpose. And this leads to them like not speaking to each other for 3 days. Whereas in the movie, they don't have the lamp for that long because this movie takes place only during Christmas time, right? So it's just like the weeks or maybe even just the days leading up to Christmas. So yeah, the lamp doesn't last very long in the movie. And then with the gift from his aunt, so in the movie, this is a full bunny onesie thing, which his father says makes him look like a deranged Easter bunny. But in the book, it was just a pair of pink bunny slippers, which is still, you know, we have the line in both where he says his aunt thinks he is perpetually a girl and 4 years old. So the bunny slippers still fit that. But yeah, it was a bit less dramatic than the full bunny outfit we got in the film. And also in the movie, we see the mom give the dad a bowling ball. And in the book, there are no stories about bowling. However, bowling comes up a lot just in general because bowling was such a big part of life here in his hometown. And even when they go out to the Chinese restaurant in the end, it's called bowling, but it just is the word bowling with the W not lit up. And so I thought that was pretty clever and funny. And yeah, I just appreciated the nod towards bowling, again, for those who have read the book, because bowling in general does come up a lot, even if there are no specific stories about bowling. And by the way, his hometown, the real name is Hammond, Indiana. However, in the book, he calls it Homan instead. But in the book, he does not make this town sound very appealing in any way whatsoever. And then it's funny because Bob Clark, when he was scouting locations for the film, he went to Hammond, Indiana, but he said that the town was completely charmless, quote unquote. And so he decided to film in a different city. And I personally have never been to Hammond, Indiana, so I mean no personal disrespect. And also this is based on decades ago, right? But I did think it was kind of funny that Bob Clark found the town just as unappealing as Gene Shepard had when he wrote about it in his book. And then with the neighborhood bully, so in the book, the bully's name is Grover Dill. And one day Ralphie just loses it and he beats up this kid for no particular reason. He just says that he has like a Tasmanian devil inside of him and it is just unleashed. Again, for no particular reason. However, in the movie, there is much more emotion behind this scene because Ralphie has had a rough few days. He feels dejected when he gets a C on a paper that he had been really proud of. And his teacher tells him, you'll shoot your eye out when he says he wants the BB gun. And so here, when the bully, which in the movie, the bully's name is Scott Farkas, not Scott, but but Scut Farkas. And in the movie, his toady is the one named Grover Dill. But anyway, they throw a snowball at him and he starts to cry. And then the bully is ridiculing him for crying. And so all of this, it's just the final straw for Ralphie, right? And he just ends up going crazy on this kid. But in both book and movie, the mom covers for Ralphie. And so when the dad comes home, she doesn't tell him the full extent of what happened. And so he therefore doesn't get the bad punishment he feared. And this is the same in book and movie, but I just really loved how it's portrayed in the movie. Like the expressions we get between Ralphie and his mom, and then the voiceover talking about how like from here on out, he had a different kind of relationship with his mom, right? And I just thought it was really sweet. And then also we see Randy before the dad comes home during this scene. We see Randy in the kitchen cupboard under the sink. And this was a detail that was mentioned in passing in the book where he says that his brother would sit in like one of the cabinets or cupboards in their house. But in general, we see much more of Randy in the movie than we did in the book. And he was just so adorable. Like that scene where the mom is getting him to act like a pig so he'll eat his meal. That was not in the book, but again, that scene was just so funny and cute. And by the way, the actress who plays the mom, she was in Close Encounters with the Third Kind. And Close Encounters features a guy sculpting his potatoes. And so here, Randy is kind of sculpting his potatoes. And I feel like that was a nod to Close Encounters. But anyway, Randy, he just has the funniest, cutest laugh. And this scene also, what makes it so good is the disgusted looks on the face of the father and Ralphie as the mom and Randy are having fun with this pig thing they're doing. And then also I like the scene when we first see the bullies and the bullies push Randy. So he's just lying on the ground. And then later he just stays lying down. And so later in voiceover, Ralphie says, Randy lay there like a slug. It was his only defense. And yeah, just so many funny moments with Randy in the movie. But then another notorious scene in the film is when one of Ralphie's friends dog dares another friend to stick his tongue to the flagpole. And the friend does this, and of course it sticks. And this also was not a story in the book, which surprised me because it's such a well-known scene from the film. But yeah, it was not in the book at all. The only thing in the book that maybe kind of like hinted towards something like this is a section where he talks about being in the marching band. And he says that for the Thanksgiving parade, it would be so cold that your lips would almost get stuck to your mouthpiece. So that's the only time that something like what we see in the movie was even slightly alluded to. But the Red Ryder story is the first story told, and the movie wisely makes this the overarching storyline. And I loved his fantasy in the film about him shooting the bandits, as well as his fantasy where he goes blind from the soap poisoning. But yeah, the scene when he goes to see Santa, that is very much exactly how it was described in the book. However, the movie does have the added scene where a woman dressed as the Wizard of Oz Wicked Witch, she comes up to them while in line, and Ralphie tells her like, don't bother me, I'm thinking. And he just takes this all so seriously, and it was just so funny and so adorable, and his line delivery is just perfect. But yeah, the way they filmed this was just so good because it makes you feel how disorienting it was to be on Santa's lap and how it wasn't as magical as he thought, and his brain just goes blank. And we also see like how jaded the Santa is, as well as the workers. And again, this was something that does come right from the book. But in both, his mind goes blank. However, right before he's about to be sent down the slide, he suddenly remembers like, no, like I want a BB gun. And so he tells this to Santa real quick, but then Santa gives him the, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. And then he's pushed down the slide. And I also love how he and Randy are just laying there, not moving at all after they've been sent down the slide. But in both book and movie, his dad is the one who ends up getting the BB gun. And it's funny because the dad is like the only character he never tells he wants a BB gun. And yet the dad knows. And yeah, the scene in the movie when Ralphie is unwrapping the BB gun, like the look on the dad's face again, it was just so sweet and I loved it. But something that surprised me about this book was realizing that so many of the stories from when he is a kid took place during the Great Depression because Jean Shepherd was born in 1921. And so, yeah, this was like almost mind-blowing for me. The movie bumps it up. We don't know exactly what year the movie takes place, but it seems to be around 1940. But still reading the book and realizing that these events in the book take place during the Great Depression. Like, I guess I think of the Great Depression in a very specific way. And so to realize that these stories he's telling are taking place during the Great Depression, I was just so caught off guard by that. And he does tell some pretty interesting stories that do directly relate to it it being in the Great Depression. And so yeah, this book just kind of gives you some interesting insight and an interesting perspective on what the Great Depression was like for a kid living in just kind of an everyday America type of town, you know? But something else that I thought was kind of wild, and yet the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what, it actually makes sense, is the fact that the director of this movie also directed Black Christmas, which is a Christmas horror movie from the 70s. It is fantastic. You should definitely watch it if you have not. But I was kind of like, wow, like that's so crazy that the guy who did that also did this. And yet, again, I feel like it makes sense in some ways because Black Christmas has moments of humor, but also A Christmas Story, it has parts that sort of made me uncomfortable as a kid. I feel like Bob Clark, he included like his own flair on this story, and he was someone who didn't necessarily do family-friendly movies. He also did Porky's right before A Christmas Story. And so yeah, maybe that's one of the reasons this movie is so good, is because it's directed by someone, again, who didn't usually do family-friendly movies up until this point, and so maybe filmed it in a more unique way, which caused it to stand out. Maybe. That's just my theory. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. But with A Christmas Story, I just need to talk about the performances real quick because the adult actors are amazing, but then the kid actors are also good. Like how they got so many amazing child actors in one movie is very impressive. From the friends to the bullies to Randy to Ralphie, they were all just perfect. And Peter Billingsley as Ralphie, he was just so adorable and funny, and he nails every scene. And again, his line delivery is just perfect every time. And then also like the more tender, sweet scenes, he also just is so incredible. He was such an amazing actor. And fun fact, he was a commercial actor before and after this movie. And afterwards, when he was around 18, he was in a commercial for gum. And in the commercial, he plays someone in a marching band who plays the sousaphone. And in the book, that whole section about the marching band, Gene Shepard talks about the sousaphone. So kind of a funny connection there. And then also the movie, it is narrated by an adult Ralphie thinking back on this Christmas season, and the narrator is Gene Shepard himself, which I thought was so cool. And he was just so perfect, of course. And the narration, a lot of it is word for word from the book. And it's interesting because Gene Shepard, he became famous doing radio, and he would tell these stories on a radio program. And a friend of his was like, man, like you should write these down. But Gene Shepard, he said like I'm a good storyteller, but I'm not a good writer. And so the friend took it upon himself to transcribe the stories as Gene Shepard told them on the radio program. However, over time, eventually Gene Shepard, he did hone his writing skills, and now we have his collection of short stories today. But I will admit, while I was reading this, I was less interested in the stories that did not appear in A Christmas Story, because a lot of the other ones I just wasn't as invested in. But I wish I could somehow read this book never having seen the movie, because I wonder what I would have thought of it then, right? Because I do think me knowing the movie so well did skew my perspective in some ways when it comes to the book. So I would love to hear from anyone who read the book before they saw the movie. I feel like it's very rare that would be the case for somebody, but there's got to be someone out there who read the book not having seen the movie. And if you were watching this video, comment your thoughts down below. But I did want to say though that Clark did make a sequel to this, which takes place in the summertime. And the sequel features the stories from In God We Trust, but it features the stories that didn't make the cut for A Christmas Story. However, I have not watched that. If you have, let me know your thoughts down below. And also for this book, for anyone who might be considering reading it, I did want to say, this was written by a guy born in 1921, and unsurprisingly, he does make a homophobic remark at one point. And then also he has this sexist section where he and his buddy Flick, as adults at the bar, are saying how ridiculous it is that these days they let girls be in marching bands, because back in their day, marching band was boys only. And so again, it's not surprising, but I just wanted to let you know in case you are thinking of reading this book for yourself. However, I honestly would not recommend this book unless you are 1, an avid reader, and 2, a huge fan of this movie. So if you are both of those things, then sure, give the book a shot. But otherwise, I say skip the book, stick with the movie, because the movie definitely wins when it comes to A Christmas Story and In God We Trust. And yeah, that wraps it up for my Christmas episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and comment down below what your favorite line is from this movie. There are just so many quotable lines, it's hard to choose a favorite. But yeah, share yours down below. And again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you enjoy this holiday season, and I will see you next time. Bye.